Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all staying home, keeping safe and healthy, and practicing social distancing. Um, I would like to reiterate at the beginning of every week, I'll be posting two videos. One will be sort of the pre-lecture video, which will include any announcements, any reminders, um, any current events I want to share with you. Anything that is sort of outside the realm of the lecture itself will be in the pre-lecture video. And then in the lecture video I'll be covering the main points of each PowerPoint that I will be sharing with you. So just to be clear, these videos, the lecture videos, should be only 15 to 20 minutes. And I have edited the PowerPoints to just cover the main points, brass tacks. However, I've left the original PowerPoints online untouched. And so you are required to read the textbook chapter, go over the PowerPoint online that I have, as well as reading the required readings for each week. And so for this week, you have chapter 9 of the textbook, and you have 2 Washington Post articles. 3 reasons Congress is broken, and people love to hate Congress. This new book reminds us why we should treasure it. And so these are required readings for this week, and the idea is once you've read the textbook chapter yourself, gone over the PowerPoint yourself, you've watched this mini lecture that I will be giving, you've read the articles yourself, then for midweek you will be going into your discussion forum posts, reflecting on some questions that I've offered, and then responding to 2 of your peers. So it's sort of it's a discussion forum. It's meant to keep the course engaging, even though we're all on the internet. So this week we'll be going over Congress, and just a major theme for the next month or so. All of these chapters, and my objective for this next part of the course, this next month or so, is for you to really get to understand how the founders created these institutions and sort of the evolution that has taken place. How have these institutions morphed into what they've become today? And is this transformation good? Is it unconstitutional? Is it dangerous? Was it meant to be? Was it unavoidable? These are all things and opinions I want you to be able to develop yourselves over the next few weeks as I go over the historical foundations of these institutions, and with the outside readings, you get an idea of these institutions really have changed. And so with that, this South Park GIF is pretty relevant because we got an economy in the toilet. Yeah, let's do that. Congress passed this $2 trillion stimulus bill last week, and it's really meant to be. They call it a stimulus, but in reality, it's really a sort of survival check, a survival bill. In other words, the economy is really going to take a hit, and it's only going to get worse as the coronavirus gets worse, the pandemic. So let's get started with this chapter. I know all the cool kids carry around a pocket constitution, right? And it's the first article. Article 1 of the Constitution is the Congress, the legislature. And the Constitution provides for a bicameral legislature. This means that there are 2 chambers in Congress, right? You have the House of Representatives, which is divvied up by proportional representation, right? And the Senate, which is divided by equal representation, right? So we live in California. There's 40 million people in the state. And so we have 54 representatives in the House of Representatives, right? Wyoming has a population of just under 300,000 folks. And so they have 1 representative in the House, right? You see the disparities in the representation in the House is based on the population sizes, right? But in the Senate, we have 2 senators for the state of California, based on our population of 40 million, and Wyoming, state of only 300,000. They have a state. They have 2 senators that represent their state too, right? So it gives us an opportunity to have mixed representation based on state size and populations. The first sentence of Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress, right? For the sake of time, I'm not going to delve into this whole debate on what does herein granted mean. I remember in graduate school, I took a class on the presidency, and my professor would not stop talking about these 2 words. Why did the founders add these 2 words, herein granted? And I would like to hear some of your feedback if we were in the classroom on what you think. But what my professor taught us was that the founders put herein granted because they wanted Congress to be, limited to specific powers in the Constitution, right? Such as borrowing money, taxing money. They're very good at these things that the founders specified for them. So when you say all legislative powers herein granted, they're in Article 1, Section 8, right? It limits them to those powers, arguably, right? That's what some constitutional scholars say. Okay, and so a constituency are residents in an area where an official is elected, right? So I personally live in Pomona. Norma Torres represents me, as well as other residents in the Pomona, Ontario area, right? So if you don't live in Pomona, she's not your representative, right? If you live in Rancho Cucamonga or Fullerton or Anaheim, you have a different representative in Congress representing you. And although we all live in relatively the same area, right, having a representative from a particular district gives them insight to local issues, what's going on the ground, and brings our interests, our desires to the front lines in Congress with 434 other people in the House, right? And so this slide is pretty technical. You should know all these things, but it's fairly important. If you're a member of the House, you have a 2-year term. You have to be at least 25 years old. There's 435 members, again, based on population size, right? And you're elected by the people of your district, right? So California's 35th district is represented by Norma Torres. She represents certain communities, Pomona, Ontario, Montclair, maybe, right? And the Senate is a whole other ballgame, right? You're given a 6-year term. You have to be at least 30 years old. There are 100 members. There's 2 from each state. And that power was originally given to state legislatures. Remember, the founders wanted the Senate to be an institution that was sort of guarded from excessive democracy, from public opinion, right? They gave that power to state legislatures, assuming that they would know what's best at the state level, right? And then the 17th Amendment was added to the Constitution, which gave we the people back, or it gave we the people that power to choose our senators. Okay, David Mayhew, this guy is the MVP of Congress, and he talks about in his main book, The Electoral Connection, what 3 factors there are in who gets elected to Congress and what they do and why. Number 1, you have to have ambition. You have to have some sort of drive to want to run for public office, right? And it really depends on who you are, what your abilities are, what your ambition is, to really create that narrative. Why am I running for office? What do I want to get done? And you have to be able to raise large amounts of money, because elections are very expensive in this country because of Citizens United, Supreme Court case that said corporations are people. You can donate as much as you want. It doesn't really matter. So it really has come down to if you can raise the most money, then you can um, win an election, right? And so you have to have ambition. You have to be able to raise large amounts of money. Having an incumbency advantage is important because the incumbency advantage is if you're in office, right, and you're running for re-election, you have name recognition, you have a track record to run on, and you have money in the bank. These three things all help incumbents win re-elections usually, right? And number three, the drawing of House districts, redistricting and gerrymandering. Again, every 10 years with the census, right? Take the census, right? It lets the federal government know where people are moving to, what communities have more people, who lives in these communities, what resources do they need. So when you redistrict, when you draw new lines for a district, you either can take representatives away from a state, you could add representatives, and that will ensure that this population, this locality, has proper representation. It's really important. Gerrymandering is used for political purposes, right? So gerrymandering is when typically a political party in control of the state has the power to redistrict. And gerrymandering is really the politicization of that, which ensures that you're redrawing a district to benefit your party, right? And you can do that in multiple ways. You can either pack a district. So let's say in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, this is in Texas, in southern states, it's pretty common to pack a district. You're packing, you're drawing a district so large minority communities are all in one district. So maybe they'll have one minority or African American representative for that state when there should be 5 or 6. You can pack a district, you could crack a district. When you crack a district, you sort of divvy it out. So, if there's multiple minority communities in a given area, you can crack a district by spreading them out into different districts so their votes are spread out so they don't probably get a minority representative in office, right? Multiple different ways this can be done. A lot of it's done racially because stats show more Latino and African American voters support Democratic candidates. And so if you're interested in Congress, which I know you all are, Mayhew is the MVP of congressional studies, and he studies Congress. He studies why people run. He studies how they're successful. He studies what factors are likely to affect their electability and their record in office. So that's important. This is one of the main points in one of your required readings for this week. The organization of Congress is important. It's again, this lecture is going to go over so little because there's so much in each of these chapters. But again, under the circumstances, I'm going over brass tacks, just bare minimum. But I want you to get the main points. Staffers are really underappreciated in today's Congress. They do so much. They make things run, right? In other words, when they were voting on that stimulus bill the other day, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, thanked his staffers for working so hard and diligently to getting that bill passed and completed. They write bills, staffers for our Congress people, right? They organize hearings. They deal with administrative agencies in Washington. They negotiate with lobbyists. They handle constituent requests and services, right? And so our Congress people are so preoccupied with running for re-election that their staffers end up doing so much of the work, and they don't have political accountability, the staffers, right? and they don't get paid enough, right? And so that goes into this whole idea of what's that ambition? If you're, you know, money is involved with ambition. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but if you're not making enough money, that's going to have a negative impact on the sort of ambition you have for running for public office, right? And so I include this slide because, you know, congressmen, senators, they have to, in Congress, they represent all different sorts of people, demographics, different demographic groups from all over the country, right? And they have to come to one institution, the House of Representatives, the Senate, to cooperate, to coordinate, to work with the other side, Republicans and Democrats, to come to a solution, to come to a somewhat moderate solution that should ultimately satisfy everyone's needs, right? Or most of everyone's needs. And with that, you think of that and you think, wow, your senator, your congressman is doing so much. And a lot of it has to do with the staffers, right? The founders did not anticipate the bureaucratization of Congress. In other words, why does one senator need a whole staff to do all these points, formulate and draft legislative proposals, organize hearings, deal with administrative agencies, negotiate with lobbyists, handle constituent requests and services, right? This just complicates the duties of Congress and really dilutes the real impact that they can have on policy, right? Caucuses are really important because they're sort of clubs. In other words, a group of senators or representatives who have common goals, interests, social characteristics can get together, and I think it's despite party. A party does unify people, right? But I believe, like the women's caucus, I believe they meet on Tuesdays and have tea, and they talk about issues that deal particularly with women. Right? There's the Congressional Black Caucus, right? They are a group of Black congressmen and women and senators that get together and they talk about issues that impact the African American community, right? The Freedom Caucus, this is sort of the far right wing of the Republican Party, very conservative folks, right? They get together and they talk about what are issues that matter to very conservative folks, right? And so caucuses give politicians a space to unite based on a common goal, interest, or characteristic, and to really come up with a platform, come up with policies that they will advocate for, that they will plan for, that they want to see put in place, right? Caucuses are really important. Influencing factors of Congress, constituents are the most important factor. We, the people. That's why the founders put Article 1, that's why the founders put Congress number 1, Article 1 of the Constitution. It's the most important branch of government. The people, because we, the people, elect members of Congress, right? In other words, we talked about this earlier in the semester. Town halls, propositions, referendums, these are all systems or mechanisms in our democratic system. Mechanisms in our system of government, a representative democracy, where we, the people, have the say, have a right to input in government what we want to get done, right? And so that's why Congress is number 1. For the second point, interest groups play an important role. They provide intel and data on pending bills, and they provide a lot of money. Right? Interest groups, the impact of interest groups on Congress wasn't always this big. They didn't always have this large impact and role on how Congress passes bills. Right? And I would say that's problematic. Right? I would say the constituents are number 1. They should be on the number 1 concerns of members of Congress. But today, a lot of it is interest groups because they provide intelligence, data, and money two members of Congress on how they should vote on a particular bill. Right? Party leadership cares if it involves a highly partisan vote. Right? In other words, something like Barack Obama's Affordable Care Act or Mr. Trump's tax cut bill 2017. You see the party leadership, right? Leaders within the party, Nancy Pelosi for Democrats, Mitch McConnell for Republicans, right? They use their voice, they use their platform to let their members know, let other Republicans or Democrats know, this is how you should support a bill. This is what the American people want, right? And so they use their platform to really help drive the vote, determine the vote for a particular bill, usually when it's partisan, like healthcare and the tax cuts. This is really important, right? We just had an impeachment hearing a few months ago. Doesn't that feel forever ago? The whole impeachment process, the whole Senate trial, that felt like years ago, but it was only months ago, right? Our beautiful thing about our system of government, checks and balances, separation of powers. Congress is expected. There's an expectation for them to oversee the presidency in order to make sure that the president doesn't abuse his powers. And that was at the core of the impeachment hearings, right? And fundamentally, it's done to ensure that funding is spent and laws are enforced properly. The presidency is the executive branch of government. They execute laws, right? So Congress writes the law, Congress passes the law, the president signs it into law and enforces it. That's why Congress is first, the president is next, in the Constitution and in the textbook, right? So we're going over Congress this week. Next week is the presidency, right? Part of those checks and balances, the Senate must confirm executive appointments, ambassadors, federal judges, and approve treaties. These are all important points that the Senate must go through to check and ensure that the presidency is choosing people that are best for the country, right? And so understanding these checks and balances between different branches of government is really important, especially right now, right? Love him or hate him, Mr. Trump has really brought back the importance of keeping aware, the importance of being aware of our constitutional system of government, right? He says he's a constitutionalist, right? Whether you agree with him or not, right? He is bringing back this sort of awareness that we should have for respecting the Constitution as a public official, right? And so that's all I have to say on the Congress from the textbook, right? Here are two slides that go over the main points of the articles that you have to read for this week. First article, people love to hate Congress. This new book reminds us why we should treasure it, right? And so if you look at Congress's approval ratings, I think they're hovering around 20%. It was lower, folks. That's still pretty low, but it has been lower before, right? And so 5 main points from this article. He numbers them too, right? So you see there's highlights all over mine, right? Many aspects of U.S. government performance are generic and typical, not exceptional. Right? His point being that it's in the Constitution that Article 1, right, the Congress, they are the branch of government that makes policy, that makes laws. And so if you look at the track record of Congress, which he goes into, right, and he goes into it in a very, that's why I like these two articles. It's very easy to digest. You don't need a PhD in political science to understand these articles, right? He talks about civil rights, the termination of white-only immigration policies, right? Economic neoliberalism during the 1970s. All these policies, today they might seem exceptional, like holy crap, how were they able to pass those things? But in reality, that's their function. The functionality of Congress is to deliberate and work with one another to pass public policy. Right? Number two, the common claim that polarization is at an all-time high is bizarre. His argument here is that, have we forgotten about the Civil War? And again, I'm not sure, you can agree with him or not. I think we can still be polarized without having killed each other, referring to the Civil War. Right? But that's his second point. Third point, Congress has been an inventive policymaker. Talks about land grant colleges, the Highway Trust Fund, the Clean Water Act. He talks about how novel and how inventive Congress has been over the years. Right? Number four, the 50s and 60s were a fertile period for domestic legislation. Civil rights, we were able to pass the Civil Rights Act in 1964, the Voting Rights Act. Right? All these laws that Congress passed back then have stabilized our democratic practices in the United States to make it easier, access more assurable that minority folks have access to the right to vote. Right? And his fifth point, people may not like Congress, but it helps make our political system stable. Right? In other words, some people may argue that Trump has sort of destabilized our political system. That's what some people might say because of his rhetoric. But remember, he's one person. He's the president of the United States. It's a big office, but there's 535 people in Congress, 100 senators, 435 reps. And so there's more of an incentive, there's more of a space and time for them to really be able to come to a consensus, to deliberate, work with one another. Those are the 5 main points of the first article. And the second article has 3 main points, 3 reasons why Congress is broken. Congress is a human institution with a distinct culture. And the modern version of that is hostile to creative problem solving. If we have a mediocre Congress, even when it manages to accomplish something, it's because of the people in it and the culture that they've created. I really like that quote from the article because Congress is not, people in Congress aren't robots. They're not computers, right? They come, and we talked about this earlier in the PowerPoint, they come with different ambitions. They come with different abilities, right? And the idea is in Congress, they have to work with one another. They have to be willing to compromise and deliberate. Right? If you have more individuals that come with an open culture like that, we might get more done, right? But if people aren't coming to the table with that expectation, then things will get harder, right? So his 3 main points: politics trumps policy, right? And the best way I can describe this point is if we were to go out for lunch, I like you guys, I think I'll take you out for lunch. Maybe I'll treat you, I don't know, check out Corky's down the street or go to McDonald's or something, whatever, right? If we're having lunch, are we going to talk about politics or policy? Are we going to talk about, oh, that Donald Trump, or oh, that Nancy Pelosi, look at what she did, right? Are we more likely to talk about that? Or are we more likely to say, well, if we add a 0.75 tax on the payroll tax over the next 30 years, that means we'll be able to pay Social Security out for another 25 years and maybe add a 2% inflationary rate to that, right? That's not very fun to talk about. Policy is not very sexy to talk about. Politics is fun. Politics is exciting. The finger pointing, the screaming, the profanities, right? And that's a problem in Congress, right? If you're elected to Congress, you should be talking about policy. You shouldn't be talking about politics, right? That's a problem. And the example he uses is the 2008 financial crisis. I could argue that you students, me, we could talk about the coronavirus under this scenario of politics trumping policy, right? Because this is the biggest crisis since the 2008 financial crisis. 2, staffers do most of the work. We need more brain power in Congress, right? Institutions like the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, their budgets have been slashed in the past 30 years. And these are nonpartisan political institutions in Congress that give lawmakers the resources and the data they need to make informed decisions on policy. With their budgets being slashed, with staffers doing most of the work, it's really been it's not very stable. It's not a very stable environment to make informed decisions on public policy. Right? We really need to bring back the GAO and the CBO, and um, really just fund them properly so our members of Congress can get the information, nonpartisan information they need to make an important public policy decision. Right? Issues, even the big ones, are no longer really debated. And I add congressional deliberation, nah. Right? In other words, Congress is the institution of government. It's the first article of the government. It's the people's branch of government. And it's their responsibility to talk about and deliberate on public policy issues and political issues of our time. They need to debate more. They need to talk about these big issues more, and they don't. That's a problem. Right? They used to. Right? If you look at the last article, they did civil rights legislation. They passed the Highway Trust Fund. They did land grant colleges. They passed the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. Congress has the ability to debate and even pass policy proposals on a macro level, on a bigger level. They don't really do that anymore. That's a problem. What can we do to get back to a political era where they actually think and talk about and debate the big issues? So those are the three main points of that article. So I like both of those articles. That's the end of this PowerPoint. I hope this lecture helped. It's probably a little long. I will be more diligent in making them within the proper time frame. But again, I'm gonna keep repeating myself just because I'm not going to be seeing you in person anymore. You're responsible to read the chapter in the textbook. You're responsible to go over the PowerPoint I've uploaded online. You're responsible for looking at this, watching this lecture video every week, and then reading the required readings I have for you. They're not that long, right? And then, right, so that's what you do. I would argue you do that, Monday, Tuesday, even Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And it's not going to take that long. It might take an hour or two, right? And then for midweek, you take all that information you've soaked in. You look at notes. Hopefully you have some notes. And then you answer the discussion questions I've posed, primarily using the readings I've assigned. And this way you get to start a discussion with other students on things you didn't understand. Maybe bring up things you didn't understand. I want to see that. I really enjoy reading what students have to contribute to the course, right? Bring up things you didn't understand. Bring up things you did understand. Bring up things you're upset about, things you want to change, right? But be sure to answer the questions. And I really look forward to reading what you contribute. And I hope you enjoy this video. And have a nice day. Stay home, keep safe, stay healthy. Bye. How do I get out of this? All right.